Journey to Lemora, Chapter 15. A Change in Scenery. Now that the threat of being chased was gone, we were on our way to Feywood to find Anyu's friend who could train me in spirit magic. As we traveled for 2 days gradually down the sloping mountains, the landscape began to change. The snow became thin and patchy until eventually there was only thick green grass and moss which grew on the sides of the trees. There were more varieties of plants, trees, and even some flowers. The air was warmer and a little muggy. We each stripped off our winter clothes, coats, gloves, extra pair of socks, and stuffed them into our bags. There were more insects in the warmer climate too, much to my dismay. Many of them were similar to our own. Gnats, caterpillars, and ants didn't look any different from normal. The spiders, however, were a different story. They still spun webs and had 8 legs, but instead of mandibles, their face was on their abdomen, with a horrific, gnashing mouth of teeth. They had 4 pairs of eyes on both sides of their bodies, too. Nick found them fascinating. "Look at this one! It's kind of like a tarantula," he exclaimed, holding a particularly hairy spider with bluish-green fuzz and yellow spots, and I squealed the most girlish scream I'd ever heard come out of my mouth. "Ugh, put that down. You don't know if it's poisonous," Amber scoffed. "Wow, Catty, you really don't like spiders, do you?" "It's all those legs and eyes and oh," I squirmed, and Nick gently put the spider thing down. The spider-like creature crawled about 3 feet when Anya pounced on it. "They don't taste too bad," he replied with a crunch, and for a moment I thought I was going to be sick. "Nope," I gagged, turning away, holding my hand over my mouth. I hadn't had anything to eat since the bird egg, but I couldn't bring myself to eat that. Anything but that. "And we thought you were survival girl," Amber and Nick laughed together. "Catty, could I see your mom's journal? I want to look this one up," Nick asked, and I dug it out of my backpack. As much as I hated bugs, they were a good sign. Where there were bugs, there were things that eat bugs, which means finding food would be much easier. We walked through the forest until we found a running creek of crystal clear water. This spot was good enough to set up camp. Nick studied my mom's journal while I set up a snare trap further downstream from the camp. Amber washed her face in the creek and checked her reflection. This was much more like the camping I was used to. The trees shaded us from the sun, the ground was soft to lay on, and we didn't need to channel magic to stay warm. The further we got from the temple, the more unsteady our spells became. I could still summon fire, but for some reason I felt a cold chill while using the magic. Like the flame was weak. It was like a bad Wi-Fi connection and we just lost the signal. I hoped we wouldn't run into any Umbra while we were like this. "According to this, those mushrooms are edible," Nick declared happily, pointing at some growing at the base of a tree with a peculiar shaped knot. I started to gather some, and a light breeze rustled through the canopy of leaves overhead. For a moment, I thought I heard whispers, but I shrugged it off. I brought the mushrooms back to camp. "Okay, I'll be the guinea pig. If I'm dead, you know they weren't good after all," I teased as I popped one into my mouth. It was soft and spongy, the way mushrooms should be. Then I heard a crack, and I ran back downstream to check my trap. "Guys, we're gonna have some protein to go with those mushrooms," I beamed, holding up a creature I caught with my snare. It could have passed for a rabbit if it could crossbreed with a pig. It had long, floppy ears, soft brown fur, and a squashed snout that wiggled rapidly. Its thick body had short, stubby legs and kicked around. I grabbed my knife to end it quickly. Then I gutted it and worked the knife to skin it. "I don't get how you can be okay with that," Amber cringed, pointing at the dead animal, "but freak out over spiders. I've never seen you complain when you're eating meat, and I know you've bought raw meat at the store before. This is just the step before that," I retorted with a shrug. "And spiders are way grosser, especially these ones." "If you say so," she muttered, looking away disgusted. She looked so thin and weak. I knew she wouldn't complain once it was cooked. My dad always said, hunger is the best spice. But that was usually before we ate something really gross. That night we cooked the pig bit on a spit over the fire. I built a small fire the old-fashioned way, with a flint stone and wood kindling. In a way, this was better than magic fire, as the smoke from the wood added to the flavor. It smelled amazing as the excess fat dripped down and sizzled into the pot we put the mushrooms in. It wasn't very big, but between the three of us, we had finally had enough to eat to feel full. We picked the bones clean and licked the grease off our fingers. Anya was content with just eating the bones and gizzards after we were done. I read the people of Feywood are nomads. They don't stay in one place in the forest long, and they are masters of camouflage. How are we going to find them, Anya? Nick asked, wiping his lips on his sleeve and turning the page on the journal in his lap. We wait. They will show themselves when they want to be found, Anya replied, curling up in a ball and resting his head on his paws. In the meantime, we should rest. I can continue your magic training in the morning. That night, I dreamt again. I saw a beautiful forest grove surrounded by tall trees and flowers covered with fresh morning dew. At the center of the grove was a magnificent tree, hundreds of feet tall. The girth of the trunk was as wide as a building, and its leaves were red and glowed like fire in the sunlight. I had an overwhelming urge to touch the tree, and as I did, the vine sprouted from my fingertips, growing blooms of small white flowers. Roots sprang from my feet and dug deep into the soil. My hair became leaves and limbs were branches as my body morphed into a tree. I couldn't move, but I felt strangely at peace. I wasn't alone anymore. I could feel the emotions of the trees around me. We were all connected like part of one larger body. I could hear their whispers in the wind. They come, they come, they come to tear us down. Then, suddenly, the Black Knights of Eloria charged into the forest grove, all bearing large wood axes. I could only stand and watch as they chopped down my brothers and sisters, wood creaking and splintering in silent screams. I saw his silver hair from a distance and knew immediately who it was. Kalen stood before me in his black armor, holding an axe, and swung it heavily at my trunk. I shrieked without a sound. "You don't have to do this," I rattled in my tree voice, but he would not hear. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't disobey," he muttered over and over as he chopped me down. When I woke up, I rubbed my eyes and felt tears on my cheeks. I stared at my hands, turning them over and back again. They were still normal, nothing sprouting out of them. Maybe the mushrooms were bad after all. Why do I keep dreaming about this Prince Kalen? The others were already awake to my surprise. Amber had changed back into her skirt, claiming it was much more comfortable in the heat. Nick gave her a sidelong glance, but looked away quickly. She handed me a pot with warm water for hygiene, and I cleaned and changed into a tank top with my jeans. To my surprise, she offered to brush my hair. "You know, back home, I can show you how to style this type of hair. It's too silky for a ponytail. It keeps slipping out," she fussed. She sounded grumpy, but I knew she was being nice to me. "It's how I like it, but sure, you can show me," I said awkwardly. "That's odd. Your hair," Amber said. "What about it?" I asked self-consciously, flatting my bangs with my hand. "It's turning silver. There's a big streak in it. That definitely wasn't there before. Look, I'll show you," she said as she grabbed her phone from her bag. I was surprised she still had her phone after the fall from the mountaintop, but she turned on the camera so I could see. Instead of a few strands, a 1/4-inch stripe had formed in my hair all the way down my back. "It's gotten bigger. I first noticed it when we started doing magic. Do you think it's a side effect?" I asked her, running the silver bit through my fingers. The silver hair texture was the same as the rest, at least. "If that were true, why aren't Nick and I getting silver hair too?" Amber argued. I don't know, I replied quietly. Something was off. I was different from the others, but I wasn't sure how. We were doing the same spells for the most part, except at night. I rubbed my eyes. Are you feeling okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I just didn't sleep well. Did you have any strange dreams last night? Nah, I slept like a log. It felt good to be full. Catch more of those pig bits, okay? She replied earnestly, and I realized this was her way of thanking me for the food. After she was finished combing my hair, we rejoined Nick in the camp. Unlike Amber, he didn't seem to notice anything different about me. Part of me was relieved, but I also felt a pang of disappointment. I shook off the feeling. Did you have any strange dreams, Nick? Actually, I did. I dreamt I was at football practice, but the ball kept growing legs like those spiders we saw. It kept crawling away from me. Why do you ask? He pondered nonchalantly, but I was cringing. That's so gross. No reason, I grimaced. His dream was definitely a nightmare, but it wasn't like mine. Mine could just be a nightmare, or I was dreamwalking again. The vision was so strange and twisted this time, more surreal than the ones before. This magic was so finicky. The sooner I could control it, the better. Hello, my name is Ella, and welcome to my channel. Here I'll be sharing with you my stories, artwork, animations. If you enjoy my content, please support me by clicking the like button, subscribing, sharing, or ringing the bell for notifications. Links to my website and social media are below. I will be releasing content in sequential order, so please check for new chapters each week.